All right, so let's talk about advanced directives. What that means is simply in advance, the patient has directed you or healthcare providers as to what their wishes are. There are several of them that are out there. The do not resuscitate is a yellow document with a red stop sign on it that is recognized here in North Carolina. It is the only DNR, the only form of do not resuscitate that we recognize. There's also a MOST form that patients can use that is recognized by North Carolina Office of EMS. So you've got the MOST form and you've got the DNR form. Those are the only two forms that we recognize. We do not recognize living wills. If a patient has a living will, then unfortunately we are not able to recognize that. There are things that we can do. We can call the hospital, talk to the medical direction, and see if they are willing to, allow us to discontinue any life-saving efforts. But the two primary ones, do not resuscitate, which basically means do not start CPR. If that person has stopped breathing, do not do any advanced life supports, any CPR, anything along those lines. Does not mean you cannot treat them if they are still alive. It just says do not start any form of CPR or advanced life support. Do not resuscitate specifically says do not start CPR. The MOST form is more specific, it's more prescriptive. So you have to read it and it will say you can do this but don't do this. You can start an IV, you can intubate, but they do not want you to do chest compressions or whatever it is that the patient wishes for you. So those are the two forms that we run into. Living will is recognized by most of your facilities, recognized by the hospital, but again, we don't recognize it here in North Carolina. Also, the durable power of attorney for healthcare. That is somebody that is different than the legal power of attorney. A normal power of attorney allows the person to make financial decisions and any other business type decisions on the patient or whoever they have the power of attorney for. There is also a durable power of attorney, which is the one that allows you to make healthcare decisions. So if the patient has a power of attorney, that person doesn't have the ability to make healthcare decisions unless it's a durable power of attorney. So keep those things in mind. I'll keep going through a couple of these others. You've got legal protections that we deal with. The biggest thing that you'll probably be tested on and you'll see is Good Samaritan laws. And those basically protect individuals, and they do carry over into EMS, even people that are being paid in some aspects, that basically says if somebody is injured and they try to bring a lawsuit against you, as long as you were doing what you thought was in the best interest of the patient, is within your scope of practice, and you didn't expect remuneration for it, then you are basically protected from that. So that's the biggest one to keep in mind for us. And ethical issues, keep in mind the ones that you have here. You'll more than likely be tested on autonomy, beneficence, and non-maleficence. So if you are into Disney, Kellyology for you, Maleficent was supposed to be a bad person. So non-maleficence means not bad or do no harm. So do not cause any harm to the patients. Beneficence is acting in the best interest of the patient. So whatever you do as far as making decisions, do what's best for the patient. Then we move on down into the ethical responsibilities. That's pretty straightforward. You've got stuff in your book, and also you've got the professional behavior evaluations that covers most of the ethical responsibilities. Professionalism is, you hear that term tossed around a lot, and there are a bunch of different meanings, and something professional is fairly subjective in certain aspects, but there are kind of a standard of ethics and policies that you'll run into, procedures for maintaining professionalism. So I do want to talk about confidentiality. We did mention that earlier with HIPAA and maintaining the confidentiality, but you do have to make sure that you maintain any information that you gain from the patient encounter. That has to remain confidential. The only people that can be shared with are people that have a need to know in the health care of the patient. So you can share that with people that are going to continue the care, and especially their health care items. There are also other personal things that you may learn or see, and those things are supposed to be kept confidential. You're not supposed to share that with anybody else, and so keep that also in mind. The biggest one for me is respect for persons, and this is simple. Simply goes back to the golden rule: do unto others as you would have them do unto you. I am one that I pride myself on saying, I don't care what you've done. I don't care who you did it to. I don't care how bad the stuff was. I'm here to take care of you and to help you. And I'm going to treat you no different than I would anybody else. So those are things that as far as your ethics are concerned, if you treat everybody the same, no matter what race, gender, creed, any of the religious, any of that stuff, if you treat them all the same, then you're right within the proper ethical bounds. Now, some of the ethical dilemmas that we run into, and unfortunately they do happen. If you think about large scale events, 9/11 is one that comes to mind. There bombings, things like that have happened, terrorist events. Those are the ones where you run into the ethical dilemma of allocation of resources. And when we talk about trauma and we talk about triage, that is one of the things that we get stuck with. And there are times where, unfortunately, due to the events, the number of people that are involved, and the resources or lack of resources that you have to make very difficult decisions. And sometimes that means you have to let a kid die so that you can save another person. I use the kid because that's the one that just hits home the hardest, but it could be adults, all those things. Making those decisions are very difficult. So that's one of the big dilemmas that we run into. End of life decisions as well. Now we did talk about the advanced directives. That helps a lot of times with the end of life decisions. Sometimes the patients have already made those decisions and they make it easy for us. Other times you run into people who have had long-term illnesses. They may have cancer or whatever, and they may not have do not resuscitate orders, and they're at that point where you can do something to potentially save them, but is it futile because of the long-term illnesses that they've had? So those are ethical dilemmas that you get into. And again, if you don't have do not resuscitate orders, you have to deal with it case by case, whether family wants you to do anything or whatever the case may be. One of the things that you can do when you run into that is to contact your medical control. Medical control is your absolute best friend. You can call them, tell them what you have, what's going on, and then let them make the decision, do or not do, whatever the case is. So those that's end of life decisions. The patient refusal of care. This is an ethical dilemma that you can get into when you have a patient who is absolutely adamant that they are not going to the hospital. If they do not allow you to take them to the hospital, then, or if they say they do not want to go to the hospital, you cannot force them if they are in their right mind. If they can tell you who they are, where they are, answer all of your questions, they are no different than you are, which means if you don't want to go somewhere, you don't have to go. Same thing for the patient. If they say they don't want to go, no matter how critical their situation is, you cannot take them if they are in their right mind. There's things that we can do. We can call the hospital. We can talk to the doctor there, let them talk to the patient. The other thing is to talk to the patient and explain to them how severe it is. We get into the informed consent. This is a case of that, where you tell the patient, sir, I understand you don't want to go to the hospital, but do you recognize the fact that if you do not go to the hospital, there is a really good chance that you will die if you do not go? And you have to use those terms. Don't use euphemisms like you might pass away, or you have to be direct and to the point. You might die if you do not go to the hospital. And if they refuse and they continue to, and they meet all the criteria for being alert and oriented, there's nothing you can do about it. Somebody there, and we see it all the time, where somebody there goes, you're going to take them to the hospital. No, I'm sorry, I can't take them. That's called kidnapping. If you try to take somebody against their will, you've got assault, you've got battery, and then if you do, you're talking about kidnapping. So these are things you have to avoid. No matter what they say, even if they have the healthcare power of attorney, they cannot make decisions for the patient as long as the patient can make their own decisions. And the patient says they do not want to go to the hospital, no matter what, there's nothing we can do about it. You document it. That is the most important. Document everything that was said. Put it in quotations. I told the patient that they may die if they don't go to the hospital. I said, do you understand what I'm saying there? Yes, I would rather die than it is what it is. So those are some of the most difficult things that we deal with. The last one here to talk about is conflicts of interest, and this is generally talking about avoiding situations where your personal interests could influence your professional decisions. Things like treating your family members, treating anybody business related. Most commonly you're dealing with treating friends, family, those types of things. Unfortunately, sometimes that's something that you have to do. Sometimes you're the only option to treating and taking care of the family or whomever it is. But you want to try to avoid conflicts of interest at all costs whenever you have an opportunity to do that. The last two things, I'll go ahead and talk about those when we're talking about professional conduct. Maintaining competence. This is extremely important. In the state of North Carolina, you have to continue your education throughout your credential cycle. In order to re-credential, you have to have a set number of hours. Those hours are listed on the NCOEMS webpage. You can re-credential by obtaining those hours over the 4-year period. Your credential's good for 4 years. You can do continuing education for that 4-year period on different topics, and then combine all that and renew at that point. Or you can do what we call a renewal course or a refresher course within the last year of your credential. That way you can renew your credential without having to take the state test again. So that's maintaining competence. It's part of maintaining competence, your continuing education. But maintaining competence is just staying abreast of the latest up-to-date knowledge, skills, making sure that you're reviewing your protocols, you know your protocols, and know the latest treatment for the patient. And again, maintaining your education. With cultural competence, maintaining that, knowing where you're at depends on the environment that you're in, the location, as to the different types of cultures that you'll run into. It's really beneficial to find out what cultures are local. Hispanic in this area is a very prominent culture that you'll run into. There are other cultures in different areas that you may run into, and each culture is a little bit different as to what's acceptable, what's not acceptable, the social norms, the societal norms, and understanding that helps you be a better provider for the patients whenever you arrive. If you recognize their culture and you're able to respect that and treat them the way that they expect to be treated, do the things that are necessary. Each culture is a little different as to how they greet people. There's all kinds of different things that you will run into with the variety of cultures. So understand the cultures and being competent in the cultures that you're around. You also have gender differences, the gender equality with the LGBTQ plus community, understanding the differences there and how to simply recognize somebody's pronouns and use the pronouns that they choose to use. It helps the patient establish a rapport and a trust for you, which is extremely important as a provider, healthcare provider, is having the trust of that patient. So that's it for your professional conduct.